So this is my PowerPoint-less presentation for you. Here's what I hope we will do today is I can give you some ideas for storytelling, such as poems or personal stories or historical stories. I will give you some ideas for adapting boxes and objects you might have at home and how to accessorize your box. We will talk about different materials for the scroll, such as Tyvek, paper, muslin, all different kinds of things. And different ways to illustrate the scroll. For example, Tyvek cutout, paper cutouts, painting, embroidery, applique. We'll consider the soundtrack or the audio portion of your Cranky. And finally, one thing I've been doing a lot of these last months is I've been working with miniatures and also how to add shadow puppetry in with your Cranky to bring it alive. And so this box, I'll start with this. It's a corrugated shipping box. And one tip is when you're making these smaller Crankies, and today I'll be mostly talking about these smaller Crankies because I'm not traveling and performing and making big things. I've been spending my time making smaller things and filming them. But if you fill the box from top to bottom with the scroll, then that will help your scroll crank steadily across and not maybe travel up or down, because if it travels up, it's going to hit the ceiling, and if it travels down, it'll hit the floor. Although, leave like a tiny bit so that there's no friction up here or down here. And so one way when I'm making a Cranky like this is so that I know where to put the illustrations is I might just take a pencil and just do a really faint mark on it, and then take the scroll out, and then I can work on it and I know exactly where I'm at and where things will lay. Another thing I do is sometimes I'll put feet on, and these are thread spools, and you can see that the spindle here goes all the way down into the foot, and that way it won't be popping out of the bottom. And you could use these wooden spools if you have them, or you could use, if you have metal or wooden blocks, you can drill a hole, or you can even make them out of cardboard. So right here, I took 3 little pieces of corrugated cardboard and I glued them together, and I have a hole in it. And so that, you know, this could be a little foot for your box. And so you can make them that way. One of my big claims to fame is that I was the first person to put clothespins on for the cranks. So that is it. That's my big claim to fame. And I glue them on. And then what else do I want to say about this? There's just a LED flashlight taped in there if you were going to do shadow puppetry. And, you know, cardboard the corrugated cardboard is actually quite sturdy. You can do all kinds of amazing things with it. And the queen of that, as far as I'm concerned, is a Cranky artist. She was born and raised in England. She got a MFA from a a school in London, Joanna Ruby, and now she is living on an island in Spain, Ibiza, and she has always made her cranky boxes out of cardboard, but she'll put sculptures on them and paper mache and beautiful painting. And every time I see something she does, I just say, oh my goodness, that's so gorgeous, you know, and it's all cardboard. And so here is a cranky she made for me in 2013. I actually commissioned her to make this for me because I was doing a presentation in Europe. And so this is corrugated cardboard that she painted with acrylics. She made this wonderful little front to it, but it's actually for the cranky box. She used a cassette tape box, and then she bent wire for the spindle and the crank, and then the scroll is made out of brown paper, probably grocery bag paper. And so it's all recycled materials. And I'll just crank it a little bit, but I'm sorry that there's a little bit of glare. It's hard to see. But Joanna's website is theateroftheancients.com. And I think Terry will put her name and her website in the chat. But she focuses on very old folklore, and she is a treasure and a inspiration to me. And another inspiration, somebody I wanted to mention, is Catherine Fahey. This paper here is Tyvek, which is a plastic, and some of you probably are already familiar with it. But the wonderful thing about this is that it won't tear. It's great for shadow puppetry. The light shines through it nicely, and it stands up and it behaves itself in the cranky box. It's a little bit sturdier than paper, but kind of the same weight. And Catherine Fahey was the cranky artist who first thought of doing that. She was in line at the post office, and she was looking at Tyvek envelopes that were right there, you know, and she took one and she held it up to the light, and she was going, wow, I wonder that would work for Crankies. So we have her to thank for that. It's really a wonderful material to use sometimes, not all the time. I also collect, oh boy, I am really a collector of things, and I love to visit yard sales, Goodwill, thrift stores, estate sales in my neighborhood, and just wade through junk. And I buy lots of these things. This little wishing well was 50 cents, and I got it many years ago, and I finally found a use for it. So this cranky I made in June, and I was you know, looking at Facebook, and I saw this haiku that someone made for the moment, the pandemic moment. And so I decided to make a cranky about it, and this is my wish. We isolate now, so when we gather again, no one is missing. So this scroll is made from muslin, and I used rubber stamps and ink to put the letters on. And if you have a smaller cranky with really a very small spindle, that spindle is, you know, maybe 1/8 of an inch. If you're using paper, sometimes the paper will be too springy and it won't crank smoothly, or even if you're using Tyvek and you have a spindle that thin, it may not crank smoothly. So muslin fabric, cotton t-shirt fabric, sheeting, that can be a really nice resource for the scroll. And also in the 19th century, moving panoramas were in their heyday in the 1840s and 50s. All of the moving panoramas used cotton sheeting or muslin, and they painted on it. So that's what they used to do many moons ago. Okay, so this next one, as you can see, I adapted a cardboard suitcase. I made this in July. July is certainly a time where I would be performing at lots of festivals. And of course, I had to unpack all my bags. I actually literally had suitcases all full of workshop materials all packed. So I unpacked all my suitcases, but I did not put them away. And Terry's going to play the video right now, and then we'll talk about the Cranky. Okay, so for that Cranky, I used Eco-Fi felt for the scroll, and that is a felt that's really readily available at Joann Fabrics or Michael's or many fabric stores, and it's relatively inexpensive compared to cotton fabrics. And it's made out of 100% recycled plastic bags plus color. And I've been using this since the beginning for a lot of my fabric Crankies because it stands up really nicely. It has some body to it, but yet light will shine through it because it's plastic. Whereas if you're using the light won't shine through it because the wool is blocking out some of the light, so your colors will all turn out kind of a dirty brown. But this is a Cranky where the Cranky scroll is really the supporting role, and the little miniatures I made are really the main storytelling puppet, or whatever you would want to call it. And these were all just made from cardstock that I had. And this little Cranky that I use at the end, I used muslin for that, for the scroll, and rubber stamping, because again, with a spindle this small, this is only like 1/8 of an inch, it probably would not crank smoothly with paper. And again, I put these little spools on it, and the spindle goes right down into the spool so that it's very secure for a little thing. And the other thing I wanted to say about this, and you're probably aware of it, but if you want to make miniatures to go along with your Crankies, there is a plethora of YouTube tutorials on just about everything. I thought, well, I'll just see if there's a tutorial on making a miniature suitcase. Well, there was 5 of them to choose from. It's just incredible. So sometimes you don't have to buy them. You can make them yourself. Okay, on to the next. Okay, you saw it first here, everybody. This could be the world's first bird feeder cranky. So this is a bird feeder that you would get in any hardware store. It's made out of cedar. And I took out, you know, they have the little plexiglass walls in there. I took those out, drilled holes for the spindles. It's actually really easy to adapt. Oh, and I pulled off the suet cages on the sides. So I was invited to submit some videos to the Seattle Children's Festival, which is next weekend, October 24th and 25th. And I have 3 Crankies that I will be showing at that, 3 Cranky films. And this is one of them. And my idea for this, it's like, okay, now I have this bird feeder Cranky. Now what do I do with it? Well, my next door neighbor, Doug Plummer, he and his wife lived next door to us for 25 years, you know. And he's a great videographer. He is a birder, very serious birder, and a musician. And his whole front, there's a fountain for the birds. There's multiple feeders, and all the plantings are bird friendly. And so, and he knows me, of course, you know, he knows what I get up to. So I said to him, well, I have this bird feeder Cranky, and I've got this idea, Doug. What if I make a scroll for it and put it in your yard, and you could just film everything that comes over to eat from it. Oh, fill it full of bird seed, which we did. And I said, what do you say? And he said, okay. So this stayed in his front yard for 3 weeks. You know, what rained for 1 solid week. This is Tyvek, held up wonderfully, just wonderfully. And he filmed like 25 different birds and multiple squirrels, of course. And so here is, and then he edited all these films and put it together. So it will premiere next weekend at the Seattle Children's Festival, and Terry will put the link there if you want to watch it next weekend. And then after it's shown, I'm going to put it on my website. But here's just the short little video. I mean, Doug did the lion's share of the work on this. All I did was make the box and the squirrel. But how to attract birds. It starts off with a squirrel, of course. You give them food that they like. So there's tons of birds, and of course a squirrel eating from this. Water to drink and bathe in, and then places to hide. And that's the end. So hope you can watch that next week, but if not, I'll be putting it out there. So I'm in a band called Poto Ritmi. It's a 5-woman band. We've been together for 10 years, And we do a lot of performing in the Northwest and up into Canada. One of our members lives in Canada, in Vancouver, which is about an hour and a half from Seattle. And we perform step dancing. I don't step dance, I fiddle. But three of the other musicians are step dancers, and we perform Crankies. And the other thing that we do is we do a lot of cranky workshops at these festivals, where, you know, nobody signs up. You're just ready with a lot of cranky kits and parts that you've pre-made, and then a big crowd descends upon all these tables, and the five of us, we're like a well-oiled machine. We've been doing this now for 5 years, and everybody knows what to do and what every single person needs help with. So another gig that got canceled is that we had a workshop planned for August at Kama Beach State Park, which is almost in the San Juan Islands. It's just south of the San Juan Islands. And so Terry's going to show you this little 1 minute or less video of us doing a workshop last summer there on the water. And then I'll show you what we had planned for this year.
So, you know, so you got signal that is past the stop sign. Well, usually you want to stop there, otherwise you might, if as you're cranking, there's a piece of tape here that holds it onto the dowel.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fine.
That's why she gets the stop sign.
My best friend though. Really? Yeah, I'm modeling it.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh boy. So we'll get back to all this. It'll happen again. So this is what I had planned. I don't know if you noticed all those cabins in the background, but they have 40 little cabins where people can stay right there on the beach. And every cabin has a little bench in front of it, so that participants are going to make these little benches. And every cabin has a broom in there, so all the participants are going to make brooms, because you have to sweep out your cabin before you leave. And you can buy these. This is a food takeout box, but you can actually buy them by the box, like 25 or whatever. And so what we do is before the workshop, we will cut with a box cutter. We'll cut a window in there. We have, like, instead of a band practice, we'll have a cranky kit practice, and the five of us will just get all these kits done. So we glue the clothespins on. We take, am I cranking in the right direction? No, is it this way? Ah, okay. And we take rubber stamps, and we do a lot of the work for the pre-work, so that participants can just start stamping, and they can just make their own little cabin cranky. Or they can draw. They don't have to use the stamps. And then these boxes are, oh, they're so cute. They have a little bench. So, and you know, we have families and children, but also teachers, artists, storytellers, librarians will also come. So it's about 50-50 of adults and children who make these at our workshops. And sometimes, you know, there'll be a child making a cranky, and I can see that parent hovering, like going, oh, I want to make one. And it's like, do you want to make one? Oh, can I? You know. And so they'll make one too. They're great fun. And then you can put everything in there. So if you teach cranky making, that approach is just one approach, and it works great if you're in a big festival setting and you just don't know how many people you're going to have. For example, at the Winnipeg Cranky Festival last year, it was like mass pandemonium. I think there were 40 participants that all just whoosh, came at once, and had lots of volunteers. And so as much of that pre-work that you can do helps everybody be more successful in a situation like that. Okay, bees. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Just want to check the time here. 11:43. So I was going to be done at 12. Okay. 12 or so. So this is a box that I adapted. Louis Leger, who is a good friend in the Seattle area. There we go. I adapted this box because I made the scroll from this Eco-Fi felt again, and it was really taking up a lot of room. And so this top and bottom piece, we had to make a new one to hold this scroll, which was starting to take up all the space. So one way I accessorize the box, I love to do this, is I used a honey dipper for the crank here, and I glued a little mason bee house on the spindle that is uncranking. So I created this, let's see, I think it was in August for the Salt Tree Art Online Festival. And that organization is focused on making art around environmental issues. And the lettering is tie-back cutout lettering with a cameo silhouette machine. And I'll just crank it for you. It's hand-stitched fabric, and these little beads are metal bead charms. So sometimes I use a cameo silhouette machine or a pry-cut machine. That's just a kind of the same thing to cut out lettering and images. So sometimes I hand cut and sometimes I use a machine. And so this is a cutting mat. It's a little bit sticky. And this is a piece of black tie-back here, or you could use paper. And it's connected to my laptop, and the software's on my laptop, and I just type out the letters, and I I put a piece of Tyvek on this mat, and I press cut, and it cuts out the letters. So here it says, have a hygge evening, which is my next cranky that I'm working on. So excited about it. So this is a helpful tool for you. I don't use it for everything, obviously, but for certain things, like for example, this bee cranky, I had started to embroider the words on, and then I loaded it into the box, and I stepped back and took a look at it, and I discovered that was just going to be really hard to read, and it was not going to work for this particular one. So I ripped out the embroidery, and I made these machine cut images instead. So that is another helpful, very helpful tip. I would say that as you go, use your phone or use something and film it and step back and look at it and see if things are recognizable and readable, or have someone else look at it. Okay. So it's a little history lesson. Moving panoramas were in their heyday in the 1840s and 50s. They were huge. They were like, the scroll was 8 feet high, maybe 1,000 feet long. They would carry these huge 2-ton moving panorama scrolls in a horse and wagon or a train or a steamboat. They toured all over the US, Canada, eastern part, and Europe. And so as I mentioned before, in the 19th century, all the moving panoramas were painted on fabric. And this one is, there's only maybe 20 of those large moving panorama scrolls that have survived to this day. One of them is the Grand Panorama of a Whaling Voyage Around the World. And this is a miniature that I purchased of the scroll. And this scroll is 1,275 feet long, if you can believe that. When it was performed, it was divided into 4 sections because, of course, that was way too much to put on one spool. And it was painted in 1848. And they were like, this was before, way before film, even before photographs were readily available in the 1840s. So people looked at paintings, and they would go to these performances, and they were like the newsreels of the day. So this is, you know, kind of hard for you to see, but on the New Bedford Whaling Museum's website, whalingmuseum.org, they have it all, a digital copy that you can watch, and you can learn more about it. And I have a page about this on my website. And it was actually, it was exhibited in 2018, and I flew 4,000 miles to see it, because the surviving scrolls are so fragile, they're almost never exhibited. And it wasn't cranked, it was kind of laid at an angle so that it wasn't hanging, but it was kind of almost hanging, if you know what I mean. And it was quite something to see that, and it might be the only time in my lifetime that that I would see something like that. So I'm so glad I went. Okay, so a couple more. Um, I was invited in May by the state of Washington to create a cranky in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. And they didn't know when they asked me to do this that I actually witnessed it. I was here 40 years ago. It was May 18th, 1980. It was my first year in Seattle. I moved out here from Ohio. And, you know, I didn't even know Seattle had volcanoes. It's like that was so far away from my radar. I was into fiddling, you know, and I was going back to school, and it's like, what? Volcanoes? Couldn't believe it. So anyhow, when the volcano blew, I was living with my brother Jim, and it went off at 8:30 in the morning, and he had his radio there, and he said, come on, we're going to go down and see it. It's like 2 hours away. And we were in the car in like 15 minutes, and we drove down there, and it was like, you know, that's a whole other story. It was just incredible. But so when I was talking to this folklorist on the phone, Michaela Croyne, who's the Washington State folklorist, before I was even off the phone, I knew how I was going to do it. I was going to have one cranky be horizontal cranking panoramic landscape, and then I was going to have a second cranky right next to it that was vertical so that you could see the volcano and the ash plume. And the lowly pocket gopher, which is an animal that gets no respect from anybody. It you know, lives its whole life underground. Well, it was the big survivor in the blowdown zone of the volcano. It was the first mammal to reappear 3 months later in the blowdown zone. And 200 square miles were blown down, totally obliterated. So the message of this is that of resilience. So Terry, go ahead and play it. Hey, thank you. So the one thing I wanted to mention about this and using shadow puppetry is to mark the scroll on the back. When you have a light shining down on it, you can't see the other side. And so one little hack you can use is to put the scroll down on a light board and use like a light colored marker, like maybe orange or something, just so that you can see the outline of where you want your puppet to be. The reason why usually I don't use a darker one is that it'll show through on the other side, so you have to be careful with it. But on this one, I used a darker one so that when the scroll is going, I've got my little pocket gopher here, so I could know where to put it, and that will help greatly. And I love, when appropriate, adding a bit of shadow puppetry to a cranky, especially the Tyvek works really well. You can put the puppet right up against it and get a nice clear image. And this one was made, when I use Tyvek, I will use a kitchen sponge, and I will put some watercolor on it, and then I will use Tyvek images, which I also paint, and I glue those on. So here's some little trees that are little Tyvek images that you can manipulate the size of them and glue those on. It would be a lot easier if I could draw, but I can't. And so anyone who's thinking, I can't do this because I can't draw, well, there are lots of ways around that, let me tell you. I'm a perfect example. But I have to say that using the Cameo Silhouette machine has taught me a lot about paper cutting images, so that actually my drawing skills and my paper cutting skills have improved since the 5 years of using this, because it's been teaching me how to do it. So that's been kind of cool. Okay, I think I want to just, it's 12 o'clock, so I'm going to show one more, and then I want to respond to your questions. So, where is it? So, I started out making all hand stitched crankies. And this again is using the Eco 5 felt. This is all hand stitched, and the back is a white or cream color Eco 5 felt, and then other felt stitched onto it. And you can see that this isn't even on the spindle, but it's quite big. And this isn't even that long of a scroll. This might be, 30 feet long or so. I've made them, I think about 50 feet is the maximum that my box will hold. And then the scroll becomes too big for the box. So there have been times where I've had to, I'll load it in and I'll look at it and I'll see, you don't have that much more space in the box. You better get to the punch line here quickly. But I wanted to mention Anna and Elizabeth, Anna Roberts Scavald and Elizabeth Laprelle, two wonderful cranky artists, and they were the ones who introduced me to this in 2011. And they've made some beautiful hand-stitched Crankies. So I have a whole page of their Crankies on my website, and AnnaandElizabeth.com. And I look back on the things that they did early on, and I'm still just blown away. So I think I'll ask Terry to show this last Cranky, the Black Cat Jig. A friend of mine, Dan Compton, wrote the tune, The Black Cat Jig, and I thought, oh, I want to make a Cranky for that tune. And so here's the story. It's what I call like a silent movie Cranky. There are no words or singing. There's just music and the scenery. And here's the whole story, that a cat gets into a box of nip and eats a bunch of it and has a nap in the sun and has a psychedelic dream. And then he wakes up with his good friend, the Scotty dog. That's it. So go ahead, Terry. So that was at a house concert, actually next door at Doug Plummer's house, and we are easily amused here in the Northwest. So, okay, so it's been really fun to share these with you, and I'm ready for questions, Terry.
I guess we should probably start at the top, because there's been quite a few questions. As I'm scrolling down, I think the one thing was the name of it's Tyvek, right?
Right.
T-I-V-E-K.
That's right. And you can buy it I buy it online, several different sources. One is Uline and another is Material Concepts. And you know, I buy big rolls of it, and sometimes I will cut to size, or sometimes my husband will just put the whole big roll on a bandsaw and cut it at like 18 inches. And so that way it's kind of pre-cut.
And the question just came up, what kind of paint works best with Tyvek?
Yeah, well, so it is plastic, and it's interesting. Certain, acrylic can work. Watercolor is what I use. But if you're going for fine detail, then it's not like painting on watercolor paper, you're painting on plastic. And, you know, Tyvek is used in the construction industry to cover houses. And it has fibers woven into it so that it's very strong, and it also has very, very tiny little holes so that it can breathe. So those tiny little holes can hold paint. What I would say is just do some testing, because even if you're using acrylic or watercolor, you'll find that some colors are going to take to it better than others because of the chemistry of the molecules and all that. So always just do some testing.
Okay. And as an extension of that, what kind of glue do you use to glue Tyvek cutouts to Tyvek screen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you want a glue that will remain flexible over time. So, you know, I usually use what's called aqua glue, which is, you know, non-toxic, not smelly, and it remains flexible. It's slow drying so that I can reposition Tyvek pieces on the Tyvek. But I've also lately, because I ran out of that months ago, and you know, I'm not doing any shopping. So I had some Elmer's school glue. That's working just fine. But don't use like Elmer's heavy duty, strong glue, because that will dry really hard, and then it's going to crack when it gets rolled up tight and it unrolls. And so yeah, cheap Elmer's glue has worked fine for me. I would not use Mod Podge. A good friend of mine, you know, we're all just learning. This is such a learn by doing thing. And she had the idea. She was gluing construction paper on white craft paper, and she covered the whole thing with Mod Podge, just so that none of the little things would pop off. And it worked great for about 6 months or maybe a year, and then it cracked, and then it became brittle. And then the next time, I've actually got this on a video. She was cranking it, and all the Mod Podge was cracking and floating down to the floor, and it was making this big crackling sound. You could hardly hear her sing from the crackling of all those Mod Podge flakes. And at the end, you look down on the floor, and there was this pile of Mod Podge flakes. So it worked great in the beginning, but after a couple years, it got brittle. So that's what you want to look for, is a glue that will remain flexible. And aqua glue I've been using for 5 years, and that's fine. And cheap old Elmer's school glue works good.
And also, to carry on with the Tyvek questions, what is the name of the cutter that you used?
Okay, I use a Cameo Silhouette, and you know, I bought it 5 years ago. I bought a floor model because they were getting in a new model, and it was 130 or something. I don't know what they cost now. But there's also a Cricut, CRICUT, or a Cricut, I don't know. And that's the same thing. So you have a cutting mat, and you put the paper on it, and you tell the computer to cut, and it cuts. I was in a paper store in Seattle. This was amazing. Okay, so I had bought some Tyvek, and I decided I'm going to do a paper cut cranky like Catherine Fahey, you know. Never done anything like that before. And it's like, it looked horrible. And I went, oh my God. Okay, I've met my match here. I'm going to go back to stitching. And then the very next day, I'm in the paper source, and I see this machine in the corner of the store, and it spits out this cutting board, and the person there took off this piece, and there were all these images, and it's like, what is that? Oh my gosh. And so I think she thought I was crazy or something, because I was just so excited to see this. And so I bought that, and that, like I said, has helped me tremendously. So yeah, do your research on YouTube. I will tell you that the Cry-Cut machine is a workhorse. I've been using, or no, the Cameo Silhouette, been using it for 5 years. I've never changed the cutting tool. It just keeps going and going and going.
And where can Tyvek be purchased, Sue?
I purchase it online, either from Uline or Material Concepts.
All right. And then Susie was asking a question about what kind of stamp pad do you use so that it doesn't bleed?
Well, let me see. There is one that I have found that's better. It's right over here, I think. Don't go away. This is my very best one. It's VersaFine. And you can see, because I've got like 15 ink pads, I wrote on the top, this one works best. This pad works well, because I wanted to remember that if I, have something special to do, that this one works the best. And I don't think it's the ink. I think there's something with the actual pad that they use that just works really well with the stamp. But also this Distress Oxide brand. This is like a mustard color, but I've been using this too. They have really nice colors, and this has been working well, both on cotton and on Tyvek.
And will you tell the participants what the name of the felt was again?
Yeah, it's EcoFi, ECO-FI. And it's like 60 inches wide. So if you were buying muslin or fabric, it would be 45 inches wide. Well, this is 60. So you really get a lot for 1 yard. And like I said, it's very readily available.
Okay. And Anne is asking, can you suggest a type of paint to use on the cloth versus the Tyvek?
Right. I have not done that. It's been kind of on the list, as I wanted to experiment, but I'm not a painter, and painter per se, my painting is like making clouds or ground or painting the images that are already cut. But I will say that in the 19th century, they used water-based distemper. This was painted with water-based distemper on cotton sheeting. And that worked for them really well.
Okay. So John is really adventuresome, and he's wondering if it's possible to create a foot-powered cranky. He's a songwriter and wanted to perform his songs while operating the cranky with his feet.
Yes.
I've always seen a team, a cranky cranker and a performer, but what do you think about the foot-powered?
Yeah, well, Charmaine Slavin in Seattle has done that, and she, unfortunately, I don't have a video. I need to ask her to do that for me so that I can put it on the website. She used a hand-cranked drill, and she used that crank and she made a pedal to go with it. She somehow attached that to the spindle, and she made a pedal, and she had to take her shoe off and strap her foot with a sock on it, strap her foot to the pedal, and she actually would make like a circular pedaling motion with her foot while she was playing guitar and singing. So, and then, so that worked okay, but it wasn't foolproof. It was very cranky. And so then she had a couple wooden gears cut by someone in Seattle who specializes. He has the software to do that, and made, a gear going this way and a gear going that way. And so that was the second reiteration of that. And then she had a baby. And since then, she hasn't been doing a whole lot of cranky performances, but it's been done, and you should do that, definitely. And send me a video.
And David is also asking if it's possible to do a double layer cranky. He means like having two rolls running in opposite directions, maybe using a light.
Right. So if you go to my website, the Gallery of Unusual Cranky Boxes, or the Gallery of Unusual Crankies, there is a cranky artist in Toronto who made a parallax cranky, and he has instructions on how to do that, so that it was, they weren't going in opposite directions, but they were going at different speeds, so that the one in the back, there were, 4 spindles, 2 on each side. And so one of the spindles had the scroll in the back, went all the way up here. And then the scroll in front of it, which could have been water, that was going at a different rate than the scroll in back. And that was actually done in a magnificent way at the 1900 World's Fair in Paris. And that is on my website on the in the history section, on the train window moving panoramas. So that they actually have more than 2. They had also a treadmill type thing with ground that was going fast, and then that was going the fastest, and then it got progressively slower with all these layers. So, in the 19th century, people knew how to make things like that. There was a crank on everything, and people knew how to make things. So, and they did magnificently.
There's lots of nice suggestions from participants, so I would encourage you all to just like read through the chat. One question. Oh no, yeah. Dinah is asking for simple ideas for shafts and cranks with stuff we have on hand at home.
Right. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. Pencils will make a good spindle. Round wooden chopsticks make a good spindle. If you happen to have, these are 1/4-inch dowel rods. Pencils, colored pencils, dowel rods, maybe even sticks from the yard. If you have it's fall, it's time to be pruning all your shrubs, you might be able to prune some sticks off that are straight enough to use as spindles. And then for cranks, of course, the clothespins, or sometimes they have clips that you could clip on, or clamps, where you would hold, you know, a couple pieces of wood together, kind of a spring clamp. And a cranky artist in Toronto, Paula Hoosman, I think is how you say your last name. She used butterfly nuts. So they fit right on top. Or, you know, in Ohio, they called them wing nuts. But, you know, there's like a wing going out here and a wing going out there, and you can crank that way. She was using that for little crankies and gluing the metal wing nuts on the top of the spindle.
Sue, you didn't show us, I don't believe you showed us any of your Matchbox crankies. Do you have any of those?
I do.
Uh-huh.
I do.
People might be interested in seeing that.
Oh, sure.
Because that's pretty something somebody might have on hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I skipped over that because I didn't want to go overtime. I wanted to get to the questions, but, oh yeah, I've made so many hundreds of these. So this is like for the holidays. These little Matchbox crankies, very economical to make, you know, depending on where you get your matches. These are diamond matches that I get at the drugstore. Each Matchbox could be like a dime or 15 cents a piece. This is a little gift box I would give. It's about fuga, the Scandinavian art of coziness during the winter. We're going to need this because it's going to be a long winter. So I would put a little teacup to drink your tea and make a little broom. Here's the brooms. I love making these. And maybe a little message in the little box that has a special message for that person. But to make these, oh, where is it? Okay, I'll just show you. So I have this is an 1/8 of an inch hole punch. And it works perfect to just punch a hole in this side, punch a hole in that side. You can put little clothespins on there and glue them on or not. And then what I did is I made a couple different scrolls just on an 8.5 by 11, and I Xeroxed off a bunch of these, cut them out. A little diamond Matchbox like this will take, let's see, this is 11 inches plus about 6 inches. So it's about 18 inches. It'll hold about 18 inches. And if you get more than that, then it's getting too much for the box. And it gets too crowded and the box isn't strong enough to hold it. So 16 inches, 18 inches, that's about it. So cut your paper so that it fills up the box totally, but it doesn't rub against it. Thread it through and then put masking tape on. So I don't know how many hundreds of these I made before I realized that masking tape works better than Scotch tape, because they put some sort of coating on the matchsticks. I mean, who would have thought? And it doesn't stick very well. And then I use a scissors or something just to, the hardest part is getting the tape to stick. But like I said, masking tape, for whatever reason, works more easily than Scotch tape. Doesn't want to stick to the matchsticks very well because they're coated. So here we go. Well, and so you know the rest. You get to the end. Get another piece. Put it on the end. Crank it back. And then, you know, you don't have that much space in there to work. You can't get your finger in there. So get something like, I use it, scissors, or right now I'm just using this little ruler, and just press it. Press the tape up against the matchstick, and Bob's your uncle. You have yourself a little Matchbox Cranky.
And the handles for the cranks are those baby clothespins?
They are, yes, and
So cute.
you can get those at Michael's or Joann's, or you can order them online. They're teeny tiny. Let me see how big they are. They are
A few minutes.
almost 1 inch, not quite 1 inch long.
Okay, well, that's those would be really fun to make for Christmas cards, moving Christmas cards, or
Yeah, and you know, they're very it's unique and heartfelt, and I'm sure that, you know, whatever holiday you celebrate, or even if it's like a little birthday present, just write a little poem and put it in a little box, and it will be very well received.